great.
Dr. Tripp and I, Dr. Jonathan Tripp is in studio with us today. Last week we talked on the air about sleep deprivation, and today we have a nation that is sleep deprived.
That's right. We're experiencing sleep deprivation, and we're going to talk about the effect of that
Uh,
too. But
Dr. Tripp is a native of Pennsylvania. Can we just quickly mention that as well, which had played a historic role last
oh
night?
my
And
goodness, I am. All I can say on the political side is the long-term view. The Court is now in better shape than it would have been, and that's I'm looking from my children's point of view. So personalities aside,
my
you now know where my vote went, and it was for the Supreme Court.
my dad was a native Pennsylvanian, and a lot of my ancestors settled in St. Mary's, which is sort of the north central part of the state, when they arrived from, of all places, Germany. Not that you'd know anything about Germans settling in Pennsylvania.
No, not at all. Pennsylvania Dutch, things like that. No.
We have a lot
Okay.
to talk about today.
Well, I my title is Election Night Anxiety, because I can talk about anxiety all day long at my office, but it was really interesting because I didn't look at anything going on during the day, just did my work day and was busy and got home really, I think it was about 8 o'clock at night before I even had a clue what might be going on in the election. And so as we watched the county by county, vote by vote, in fact, New Hampshire is an absolute joke in my opinion. They only have a handful of people, but it took them all night long to count, two or three votes at a time, and it was just hilarious to watch
One,
that.
two, buckle my
Yeah,
shoe.
no, and
Yeah.
it was a close race. So I mean, I'm glad they counted, but it was funny. So took that opportunity to say this is a perfect opportunity to talk about anxiety and the symptoms and things that are obvious and not so obvious, and the effects on our bodies, and what can we do about it. So there's lots of people. I think last night were nail biting and all kinds of other things. And this morning we have half of the country in depression and half in euphoria, and another, couple of them that weren't quite sure what to do about this.
This is a will be like a real illness though for a great many people. We're not just talking sleep deprivation. Some
Yeah.
people are going to go into a long wintertime depression over this.
Well, that's true. And then you can come to my office and we'll talk about vitamin D and how to fight through the winter. But today, let me kind of go through just the symptoms of anxiety to start with. There's some obvious ones. When people have a true panic attack, they get short of breath or they hyperventilate. And you don't have to get into a full panic attack to have that feeling of shortness of breath, but rapid heart rate or even feeling of palpitations, uh, people get shaky. So you actually have tremors. Uh, and then maybe not quite so severe, but you can have a generalized nervousness, kind of a feeling of angst that you're not quite sure why it's even present. And so those are kind of the obvious symptoms of anxiety. Some of the not so obvious, I think, catch a lot of people's attention when they hear this, and that is being distracted, not being able to focus. So easily distracted. There's a kids' movie called Up. There's a famous line. It's a one-word line: squirrel, and it's the distraction of the dogs in the movie just because of the presence or the thought of a squirrel. So having that lack of focus, being quick to anger, um, being easily frustrated. Does this sound like sleep deprivation to anybody? As somebody that's been short on sleep for a couple nights in a row? All of these kind of fit into that. Being intolerant of circumstances or even, specific a person, interaction you may have at a store, or, some type of interaction there at somebody's front desk. And it's just, you're saying, why am I acting this way today? Sometimes it is you're just lacking sleep and that increases your anxiety. But a lot of times there's more going on in your life, and you're quote taking it out on somebody else that doesn't even deserve it. Um, some other things right now, there's a lot of very serious colds, chest congestion, sinus infections, things that are really taking people a hard time to get over. So a suppressed immune system, that's one that stress will get after you. Decreased sex drive. So there's one that, in fact, there's some medicines that we worry about decreasing libido with the medicine, and I'll use those same medicines on somebody that's obviously anxious, and they'll come back and say, "What were you talking about? That decreased libido? My sex life is better now than it's been in a long time with that medicine." And the answer is that's because we got the anxiety and the stress down, and you're able to focus a little bit on things you'd like to focus on. So A big one for me also is abdominal symptoms. We'll get to that a little later, but well, actually, let me just talk about some of those. People don't connect their tummy with their brain, but the brain is the deal. If the brain is not happy, your tummy is not happy. I mean, just think about anything sudden that happens to you. People will talk about getting a knot in their stomach. That connection is direct, and so things like cramping, bloating, pain, even diarrhea. This is some of the stuff that with my parents. My older brother was hit as a child, as a 2.5-year-old, broke his skull and his legs. Nightmare recovery experience. So anytime my parents heard an ambulance for 10 or 15 years after that, they immediately had diarrhea. So brain gut connection, absolutely.
This is this goes back to that holistic that the whole body is is a
It's
connected
connected.
system, right?
Yeah, yeah. This is very osteopathic. From my training as an osteopath or a DO, that's one of the main tenets is that the body is a unit, and that the function and the structure are interrelated. So the brain, the mind, body, spirit, it all is connected there.
We've got
So
to take a short break, but we've got more with Dr. Jonathan Tripp on the way. He's here from Tripp Family Medicine in Twin Falls, which is located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office. And as he likes to say, life is too short not to feel good. And talking a little bit today about how you might overcome some of the post-election anxiety some people may have, and
that's right.
we'll have more on that coming up in just a few minutes. Bill Colley with you as well, and your telephone calls if you have a comment or question for the doctor today. Just on the other side of the break on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.
Bond, love it.
The doctor, of course, when he's not working as an international man of mystery,
That's right.
he's
I have the right gun and everything. I just need the car. That's
Dr.
right.
007. Dr. Jonathan
Love
Tripp in
that.
studio with us. It's 8:42 and it's call it 37. Bill Colley with you as well on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And of course, the segment of the program is Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. We mentioned the location of the office, but for people, a lot of people listen every week, and a lot of people, newcomers to the area, for instance, don't have
That information,
a
sure.
provider. I mean, they're looking for a doctor in the area, and okay, how do I get in touch with the folks at Tripp Family Medicine?
Well, happy to tell you that we're easy to reach by telephone, by Facebook, or by the website. And so the telephone number is 208-933-4400, 208-933-4400. Website is tripfamilymedicine.com, and Facebook is Tripp Family Medicine. So those are easy. But whether you're seeing me, whether you're seeing one of my physician assistants, or we have a nurse practitioner also that works with us part time, excellent care. We share. In fact, we literally sit next to each other, kind of in a bench type desk situation. So when people complain about other offices that they never see the doctor or they don't think anybody else knows what's going on with their care, this is an office that we can't help but share because we're all right next to each other. And so we definitely are all involved in your care. And I use uh, their understanding, their experience to really help me, and I hope I help them to get better care for every patient. So it's really like you get two or three opinions anytime you come to visit our office.
And we should point out as well. I mean, because Fillmore Street's a fairly easy place to get to. It's right off of Pole Line Road and a block down the street or so to your office. That if people would also like to get involved with the project you've been working on to help people this winter, they can come by the office and perhaps drop off a coat.
Yeah, for the last couple of weeks, we've been doing a coat drive for those that probably can't afford or won't have a good coat for this winter. We've been blessed with beautiful weather so far, but I'm pretty sure we're about at the end of that. We are in November. And so we've had great response so far. Love to have more, and that is any children's, men's, women's coat, anything that you aren't going to use, or even if you think, oh, I'm going to get a new one anyway, bring the one you're not going to use, or the ones that you're not going to use if it's like the closet at my house. And please help us help others. Valley House will be the first recipient of about the first 50 or so coats, and depends on how many children's coats we have, what'll go there. But we're nearing that number. I think we've actually exceeded it, so we're looking to place these in some other needed, venues. Schools are part of what we're doing as well. So thanks for the response and happy to see more. We'd love to have you contribute to that coat drive.
You're talking about anxiety this morning, and people may be experiencing some of it from following the election, but in many cases, I've known people who've had these attacks of anxiety sometimes for years. I used to have a coworker, and she started to lose her hair, and after being examined by a doctor, she had stress in that they had a mortgage on the house they were struggling to pay. There was marital discord. She had some kids who were giving her some trouble, who were a little bit on the unruly side after they grew up, and things weren't necessarily all pretty there. And all of these things were going on day after day after day in her life. And then she started brushing her hair in the morning and noticing a lot of her hair was coming out. And clearly, they told her, "You're under so much stress. This is the result of it. What's happening now?"
This is a great example. I have kind of a final statement about making changes to decrease stress, decrease anxiety. This is a scenario that's very difficult for her to say, well, what do you want me to change? You want me to get rid of the kids? You want me to get divorced? You want me to get rid of the house? None of those are easy. And so we're looking for other ideas that could compensate. Maybe, selling the house and getting a smaller house, smaller mortgage. That might be a great move for all involved, but that's a big change and might be what's required. But I want to acknowledge that changing your stress, changing your environment is not usually an easy, quick switch and say, oh, well, I'll just, I'll eat whole wheat instead of white bread. It's not that easy.
You often take your problems with you wherever you go.
Yeah, yeah, they don't quite go away. So let's kind of skip to some of the treatments. That was going to be kind of the end, but this is a perfect time to talk about it. Treatments, what's really interesting is when you have stress and anxiety, you're pumping adrenaline into your system all the time. And I want to talk about the fight or flight response. But the single best thing you can do immediately is physical work, physical exertion. So whether that's, work that you'd say, hey, this is productive work, or whether it's exercise that's good for me, something physical that will help run off or use up some of that adrenaline that you're pumping into your system. So, exercise, great thing, good for you, mentally as well as physically. So, let me kind of go back to what's that effect on our bodies. It's called a fight or flight response. Anxiety or stress is simply a fight or flight response. If we think of it in the extreme, you walk out in front of a bus and boom, it hits its brakes and you realize you almost died. That adrenaline rush is to help you run or fight. I would not suggest fighting the bus. It's more of a run in this case.
It's like trying to take on a moose.
Exactly. Yeah, that usually doesn't work out so good. So, but let me tell you what happens when we have that fight or flight response kick in. It's adrenaline, and there's other natural steroids or hormones that also kick in and change a lot of our body functions that are meant to be very temporary, very immediate. And so the biggest that I can tell you about is blood flow, how it shifts from, shall we say, non essential organs for that moment. And the biggest area is the gut, so your stomach and your intestines shifts away from there to the skeletal muscles, your arms, your legs, the things that are, and it actually causes dilation of your eyes so you have sharper image. Um, and so with that, you're ready to fight or run. And that's, it's the feeling is, let's move, not take time to digest it at this moment. It's like we'll digest later if we're still alive. So that's the fight or flight response in a nutshell. And it's okay short term, but if we are doing that chronically and frequently, it's really tough on us. So let me tell you the effects of what that fight or flight response is if it's happening low grade all the time. And that's what we all often talk about our constant stress. Uh, Number one, it decreases oxygen and nutrients to the gut because that blood flow goes down. And that's happening chronically. So with the gut itself, you have increased waste products that causes irritation in the intestines and the stomach. You have more irritability, you get more spasms, and you get erratic function. And so a lot of people will talk about IBS or irritable bowel syndrome because they have bloating or they have constipation or they have diarrhea or it goes back and forth and they just can't figure out why their stomach just won't settle down and they'll even try gluten-free diets or sugar-free diets or there's a great diet called the FODMAP diet, which is an acronym that are low um, fermenting type of things. So things to try to help the gut do better. But the truth is, if there's this chronic anxiety overriding everything because you're taking care of kids or a mortgage that's in trouble or struggling through a marriage or a job or whatever is the constant stress, uh, those things, your gut is not going to work well. And what's really interesting, and I guess I'm telling this is almost one of my little pearls, and that is many, many, many times people come in and say, I've had abdominal pain, I've had stomach pain for 2, 3 months or years, and nothing works. Nothing changes it. And it's a hard sell for me to tell them we need to talk about anxiety. But when they do, almost always, that gut gets a lot better or all the way better. And, then I look really smart, but I'm really just doing the same thing over and over with a lot of those symptoms. So, but it's a hard one to tell the patient, you're just not handling your stress well because these are usually high functioning people. They aren't victims. They are really productive. They're doing things. They're going places. And so to say you need some help is sometimes a hard one to get through. So we welcome any callers that have great questions about this. But I also talk about other things that cause the symptoms of anxiety, but aren't anxiety. This is what being a doctor is about: is saying, well, what else could cause this?
And sometimes there's environmental issues that obviously would come about in this situation. So you have to be able to figure out which,
It is a teasing out of where do these symptoms come from, because I'll have people come in and say, what, I never have any trouble, and then my heart starts to race after I sit down.
I had a years ago. I was having, I guess, a stressful period in my life, and my hands literally looked like I had eczema,
Yeah,
or as if I had bad burns,
and they
and
peel.
and this was going on, and actually I was at the doctor's office, and the theory was it was eczema, but then I moved out of the house I lived in, and within a couple of weeks, all of the troubles with my hands cleared up. So there was the environment versus the stress.
And were you with different roommates?
I just moved from an old musty house into a new place, I guess, and
Okay,
that was what changed it.
something changed there. Yeah, no, that's I had a similar experience, and I never did figure out what it was. We think it might have been a fungal infection, like you say, being around uh, something that's musty, molds and things like that. And that happened to me twice in my young adult life, and luckily hasn't happened since. So I'm staying out of those houses.
There are a number of ways you can actually deal with this. One of the things you wrote down was physical work and exercise. I have a friend who he used to have panic attacks, but once he actually started going out for a daily walk and a long walk, he suddenly cleared all of those things up.
Well, and if his walk was a leisurely walk, you can't really say it's exercise. That helps some, but it's not like he's pushing his heart rate or anything to get cardiovascular improvement. But I would guess that his long walk was a time of thought and meditation that allowed him to kind of clear his brain of the things that are building up. And so one of the main things that we can do pretty easily is start taking time with no phone, no TV, no internet, no distraction, even if it's for 10 minutes in a day. And, the gurus of life will call that meditation. I call it a timeout. And so when we talk about little kids that are going crazy and bonkers, we put them in timeout for a minute and they calm down. Why? Because you took away a lot of the stimulus. So if we as adults take a little time out, that helps a lot. And you can call that meditation, let things kind of go. You can play music. You just be quiet. Like I like to drive in the car if I'm doing long distances without the radio on because that's a great meditation time.
You mentioned a lot of
Sorry, I
doctors.
shouldn't say that on the radio, should I?
A lot of doctors may not bring this one up, but I think it dovetails well here. Prayer, you mentioned that as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. Prayer for anybody that has a religious background or even doesn't, try it, you'll like it. You know, Acknowledging that there's a higher source, a higher power takes a lot of the responsibility of or the weight off of our shoulders and allows us to say, hey, I need a little help. And that often is a huge stress reliever, just knowing that there's potentially even some greater power, greater being that wants to assist us. So yeah, prayer is a big part in that meditation category.
Dr. Jonathan Tripp in studio with us this morning. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. Bill Colley as well. We got about 2.5 minutes to go. There was something here as well in treatment that you mentioned called biofeedback. What exactly is that?
That is a great word. Biofeedback is really a training using, I'll call it electronic type of feedback. You know, we talk about like a polygraph or things like that to tell you if you're stressing more. But using that same type of technology, you learn to identify what stresses you and how to calm down. It's a training program essentially done by uh, counseling or other professionals that will help teach biofeedback techniques. I don't want to underemphasize counseling either because counseling, in my opinion, if it's good counseling, gives you tools of how to deal with things. It's not just about listening to your sob story and a time to vent. Venting is great once, but not multiple times. So a good counselor gives tools, helps people really move forward in their problems and how to deal with them.
I was going to say, those old stories from the 1970s about primal scream therapy,
Yeah,
people sitting around rooms and just screaming at the top of their lungs. It might briefly work, but it wasn't necessarily a long term fix.
that's a great quick adrenaline release, but yeah, long term didn't change the world. So, and last but not least, of course, we use medication. And if you're coming to my office, we're using medications that are not addictive, not personality changing, and often just a small dose goes a long ways. And my use of those is usually on a temporary basis to give the brain a chance to retrain to what normal is. So this is not a life sentence if you have to go on medicine to control anxiety.
For people, again, who'd like to get in touch with your office and maybe even drop off a coat, how do
Sure.
they go about doing that?
Yeah, our office is at 1411 Fillmore, which is across from the entrance of the post office on the north side of town. So you bring in a coat, we'd love to have that, or multiple coats. And our phone number is 933 4400. 933 4400. And you can check us out. We have a new website that I think kicked off today. So, day after the election, we have a new website, and it's trippfamilymedicine.com.
And it's a beautiful day. Looking for warm temperatures, as you said, they may not last, but we have at least a lot of people who may have that anxiety. If they went for that long walk today, might
Yeah,
find it all
it,
just dissipates.
it's a great day to go. Yeah.
Dr. Jonathan Tripp joining us in studio this morning. We've got a short break coming up. News from Fox at 9 o'clock. Also, in the next hour, I think we're going to have an opportunity to talk with Jack Johnson, who longtime law enforcer in the area. And now he's waiting to be sworn in after winning yesterday a seat for Twin Falls County Commissioner. He's just got a couple of months now to bide his time until he takes the job, but he's going to outline some of his goals. That's coming up in the next hour on Top Story with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. It's 39.